The shadow in your MBTI type. What you're hiding from yourself. The hidden you. Have you ever caught yourself acting in a way that felt completely foreign to who you think you are? Maybe you're someone who prides themselves on being logical and rational, yet you found yourself making a decision based purely on emotion. Or perhaps you're naturally outgoing and social, but there are moments when you retreat so deeply into yourself that even your closest friends don't recognize you. These moments aren't accidents. They're glimpses into what Carl Jung called your shadow, the parts of your personality that you've unconsciously pushed away, denied, or simply never developed. And here's what's fascinating. Your MBTI type, the personality framework that many of us use to understand ourselves, actually holds the key to understanding what's hiding in your shadow. Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who laid the foundation for what would later become the Myers-Briggs type indicator, believed that we each have a conscious personality, the person we know ourselves to be, and an unconscious shadow that contains everything we've rejected about ourselves. But here's the thing that most people miss. Your shadow isn't just random. It's actually predictable based on your personality type. Think about it this way. If you're naturally introverted, your shadow might contain extroverted qualities that you've never fully embraced. If you're someone who makes decisions based on logic and analysis, your shadow might be filled with emotional, values-based ways of being that feel uncomfortable or unfamiliar. The question isn't whether you have a shadow. We all do. The question is, are you willing to meet it? Because according to Jung, true wholeness, what he called individuation, can only happen when we integrate these hidden aspects of ourselves. We can't become fully who we are meant to be by only developing our strengths. We have to face what we've been running from. So today, we are going on a journey into the shadow side of your MBTI type. We'll explore what your particular personality type tends to hide, why these hidden aspects emerge during times of stress, and most importantly, how you can begin to work with your shadow instead of against it. Understanding Jung's shadow theory. Before we dive into how this plays out in different personality types, let's understand what Jung meant by the shadow. He described it as the part of our psyche that we've relegated to the unconscious, not because it's inherently bad or evil, but because it doesn't fit with the image we have of ourselves or the image we want to present to the world. Jung believed that the unconscious mind speaks to us through dreams, emotions, and those moments when we surprise ourselves with our own behavior. The shadow, in particular, shows up when we are under stress, when our usual coping mechanisms aren't working, or when we are pushed beyond our comfort zone. Here's what's crucial to understand. Your shadow isn't your enemy. It's not the bad part of you that needs to be eliminated. Instead, it's often the repository of untapped potential, of qualities that could actually serve you well if you learn to integrate them consciously rather than letting them run wild in your unconscious. For example, if you're someone who has always prided yourself on being agreeable and accommodating, your shadow might contain assertiveness and the ability to set boundaries. If you're naturally spontaneous and go with the flow, your shadow might hold structure and planning abilities that you've never fully developed. The Myers-Briggs type indicator, based on Jung's work, identifies our preferences across 4 dimensions: where we focus our attention, how we take in information, how we make decisions, and how we approach the outside world. But here's what many people don't realize. For every preference you have, there's a shadow preference that you've likely underdeveloped. Jung called this the inferior function, the psychological function that's least developed in your personality. This isn't just your weakest area. It's often where your shadow lives. It's the part of you that feels clumsy, uncomfortable, or even threatening to your sense of self. When we are young, we naturally develop our strongest functions first. It makes sense. We get good at what comes naturally to us. But as we mature, Jung believed we are called to develop our inferior functions, to integrate these shadow aspects of ourselves. This is where real growth happens, where we move from being a well-developed version of our type to becoming a whole human being. How MBTI types develop shadows. Let's get specific about how this works with your MBTI type. Each of the 16 types has a particular shadow pattern, and understanding yours can be like having a roadmap to your own unconscious. If you're an introverted thinking type, maybe you're an INTP or ISTP, your dominant function is introverted thinking. You live in the world of analysis, logic, and internal understanding. But your shadow likely contains extroverted feeling, the ability to tune into others' emotions, to make decisions based on values and harmony, to express warmth and connection openly. When you're stressed or overwhelmed, you might find yourself becoming unusually emotional, making decisions that seem completely illogical, or becoming overly concerned with what others think of you. This isn't you being weak or irrational. It's your shadow trying to balance you out. On the flip side, if you're an extroverted feeling type, perhaps an ENFJ or ESFJ, your shadow might contain introverted thinking. You're naturally attuned to others' needs and emotions, but your shadow holds the ability to step back, analyze situations objectively, and make decisions based on logic rather than harmony. Your shadow might emerge as being unusually critical, withdrawing from social situations to think things through alone, or becoming fixated on details and analysis in a way that feels foreign to your usual approach. The pattern continues across all types. Introverted sensors might have an extroverted intuitive shadow, finding themselves suddenly drawn to possibilities and abstract ideas when they're typically focused on concrete reality. Extroverted intuitives might discover an introverted sensing shadow, becoming unusually focused on details, traditions, or bodily sensations during times of stress. What's particularly interesting is that our shadow often shows up as an exaggerated, underdeveloped version of our inferior function. So if you're typically calm and logical, your shadow emotional responses might be dramatically intense. If you're naturally flexible and adaptable, your shadow need for structure might manifest as rigid, all-or-nothing thinking. Have you noticed this in your own life? Think about times when you've acted in ways that surprised you, or when people have said, "That's not like you." These moments often provide clues about what's living in your shadow. The shadow in action. Real examples. Let me share some real examples of how this plays out in daily life. I work with someone who identified as an INTJ, naturally strategic, independent, and focused on long-term goals. But whenever she was under extreme stress, she would become emotionally reactive in ways that shocked both her and everyone around her. She'd find herself crying over small things, making impulsive decisions based on how she felt in the moment, or becoming overly concerned with whether people liked her. For years, she thought these moments meant she was broken or weak. But when we explored her shadow, we discovered that her inferior function, extroverted feeling, was trying to tell her something important. Her shadow was pointing to her need for emotional connection, for making decisions that honored her values, not just her logic, and for expressing her feelings rather than always keeping them internal. Another example. I know an ESFP who's naturally spontaneous, people-focused, and lives very much in the moment. But during a particularly stressful period in her life, she became obsessed with planning every detail of her future, creating complex systems and schedules, and constantly analyzing what could go wrong. Her friends didn't recognize her. She seemed anxious and rigid in a way that was completely unlike her usual self. What was happening was that her shadow, her underdeveloped introverted thinking, was trying to bring some structure and analysis to her life during a time when her usual go-with-the-flow approach wasn't working. Instead of fighting this, she learned to appreciate that her shadow was offering her tools she needed. Here's what's important to understand. When your shadow emerges, it's often trying to compensate for something that's missing in your conscious approach to life. It's not trying to sabotage you. It's trying to help you become more whole. The key is learning to recognize when your shadow is active and approaching it with curiosity rather than judgment. Instead of thinking, "Why am I acting so weird?" try asking, "What is this part of me trying to tell me?" Jung believed that the goal isn't to eliminate your shadow but to integrate it consciously. This means developing a relationship with these hidden aspects of yourself, learning to access them when they're needed rather than only when you're stressed or overwhelmed. For the INTJ I mentioned, integration meant learning to check in with her feelings regularly, to consider the emotional impact of her decisions, and to express her care for others more openly. For the ESFP, it meant developing some planning skills and analytical thinking that she could use when needed, without abandoning her natural spontaneity. Working with your shadow. So how do you begin to work with your shadow? The first step is awareness. Start paying attention to when you act in ways that feel unlike your usual self. Instead of dismissing these moments or feeling ashamed of them, get curious about what they might be telling you. Jung emphasized that shadow work isn't about dramatic transformation. It's about small, consistent steps toward wholeness. If you're naturally a thinking type, you don't need to become an emotional person. But you might benefit from developing your ability to tune into feelings, both your own and others, as additional information in your decision-making process. If you're naturally a feeling type, you don't need to become cold and analytical. But developing your thinking function might help you make decisions that honor both your values and logical considerations. One practical approach is to identify your inferior function and then look for small ways to develop it. If you're an introverted intuitive type, your shadow might contain extroverted sensing, the ability to be present in your body, to notice your environment, and to engage with the physical world. You might try activities like dancing, sports, or simply practicing mindfulness of your senses. If you're an extroverted sensing type, your shadow might contain introverted intuition, the ability to see patterns, to consider future possibilities, and to trust your inner knowing. You might experiment with meditation, journaling about your dreams, or setting aside time to reflect on the deeper meaning of your experiences. Another approach is to pay attention to what you criticize in others. Jung observed that we often project our shadow onto other people, becoming irritated or judgmental about qualities in them that we haven't acknowledged in ourselves. If you find yourself consistently annoyed by people who are too emotional, too rigid, too scattered, or too controlling, there might be a shadow aspect there for you to explore. The goal isn't to become someone you're not, it's to become more fully who you are. Your personality type is still your home base, your natural way of being in the world. But by integrating your shadow, you gain access to a fuller range of human experience and capabilities. Embracing your wholeness. As we wrap up this exploration of your shadow, I want to leave you with one of Jung's most powerful insights. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Your shadow isn't the enemy of your growth. It's an essential part of it. Those aspects of yourself that feel uncomfortable, unfamiliar, or even threatening to your sense of self aren't meant to be eliminated. They're meant to be integrated, to become conscious allies in your journey toward wholeness. The beautiful thing about understanding your shadow is that it frees you from the exhausting work of trying to be perfect within the narrow confines of your personality type. You don't have to be the perfect INTJ, the perfect ESFP, or the perfect anything. You get to be a whole human being with access to the full spectrum of human experience. Jung called this process individuation, the journey toward becoming who you truly are beneath all the roles, expectations, and self-concepts you've accumulated. It's not about becoming someone else, it's about becoming more fully yourself. So here's my challenge for you. This week, pay attention to moments when you act unlike your usual self. Instead of judging these moments, get curious about them. What might your shadow be trying to tell you? What underdeveloped aspects of yourself are trying to emerge? And here's a question to reflect on. What part of you have you been pushing away? What would it look like to meet that part of yourself with compassion instead of resistance? I'd love to hear about your experiences with your shadow in the comments below. What have you discovered about the hidden aspects of your personality type? How has understanding your shadow changed your relationship with yourself? If this resonated with you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing for more content on personal growth and psychological insight. And remember, the journey toward wholeness isn't about perfection. It's about integration, about becoming comfortable with all aspects of who you are. Your shadow is waiting to be met with curiosity and compassion. Are you ready to say hello?